Good afternoon, everyone. I'm coming to you from my car. I'm not driving right now. I'm in a parking lot. And this is video 3 of 5. We were going to finish up our portrait project and we're going to do all the rest of this stuff that you can see here. So let's get started. I'm going to first talk about using push and pop to temporarily change something called the drawing state. Let me show you what I mean. Here's my project. Here's where we left off. And I've got Capoeira Angola written here, but it's off center. So I want to center that. And that's going to be in this area. The other thing that I want you to see is that I've added some comments after my states so I know which state is which. So the first one is capoeira and the second one was bread and the 0th one was, or yeah, the second one was band and the third one was my bread state. But the first one was the capoeira one. I have also commented out my song playing because I'm sitting in a car and it's not loading because I'm sitting in the car. Here's where it says text Capoeira Angola, and I want that to be centered. I just want that to be centered, so I want to be able to write width over 2, height over 2 here. But I'm pretty sure that I do not have text aligned center. In fact, yeah, I don't see text aligned. I see image mode center, but I don't have text aligned center. And I I might put that in there, I might not. I'm going to put it in right before this because here, watch. I know that I want this in the center. I know I want it in the center, so I'll put text align center here, maybe even center, and that's cool. But if I have other text somewhere else here, this is going to mess it up. So what I can do is I can put push here because that will push the state of text align, and then I'll just pop it right here. So push and pop is pretty good for a whole bunch of stuff. It actually will save your fill state too. So if I had a different fill state and even a different text font state before this, it'll like save what I had before, and just in this little area I can change all this stuff. But then once I hit pop, it's going to go back to where it was. So isn't that cool? It's kind of like just save the status of what's going on here and then just go back to whatever. I can change stuff in this little area. So it isolates what's called the drawing state. Let's see if it worked. It did work. And you see this stuff is I don't have a text mode anything. So the default text mode is aligned to the left. That's some way you can use push and pop. It'll temporarily let you change the drawing state, and so that affects things like text align, rect mode, and fill and stroke. And then once you hit pop, it'll go back to where it was. Now we're going to talk about animation. We're going to animate a rectangle going across the stage, and I'm going to talk about variable X and its scope. So you can open up an editor with me. Let's do that. I'm going to challenge you to make a rectangle, but at the left side of the screen. Can you do that? Usually I just type rect 100, 100, 100, 100, but let's see if you know how to do that. Make it just on the left side. It would be rect. Remember the first argument is the X location. So 0, 100, 100, 100. What do we get when I type that? I'll have the rectangle on the side here. To animate this going across the stage, I'll want the X location to first be 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, and so on until it gets to 400. In fact, once it gets to 400, or the width of the screen, once it gets past that, once it gets greater than that, I'll want it to loop again. And we may have done this in class already, but the way that we're going to do it is we want a variable X location. Remember that that is the X location of the rectangle. So I can put whatever I want here, but I'm going to put X. You can put X location. And it's easiest for me to just write X there, and that's going to be the variable name. And the way I declare and define X is let X up here. I call this the global area where you can define and you can declare variables. Declaring a variable looks like this. I'm declaring that there will be a variable named X, and then I can initialize it this way. So that's one way of defining. You could also put this inside here, but some of you programmers already know that if you do that, then this x only exists inside this function setup. If I try to print x here, it won't work. It'll be a different x. So when we, and later on when you add this to your program, to your portrait program, you're going to, any variables that you declare, you probably want to put them up in the global area outside of any of these functions. So it's available to all the functions. That's called variable scope. So now this x is up here, it's available to all these functions. And I've initialized it to 0, so the first time this runs, it's going to be 0. Let's see if that still works. Yeah, it still works. Yay. So the next thing I want to do is change that x every time the draw loop happens. So if I do x equals x plus 1, after we draw the rectangle, we're going to add 1 to x. And then we're going to hit this, and we're going to go back to the beginning of the draw. And then we're going to draw a rectangle, but it's going to be 1. And then the next time we're going to add 1 plus 1 equals 2 to x. And the next time it will be 2. Watch this. See, it's going across the screen. Once my x position gets past 400, it's going to keep going. So if I want that to loop, I would have an if statement. If x is greater than width, or I could write 400, but if I change it, I'm going to want this here. And you can do this if you want, or for the purposes of this particular project right here, if you only have one line that you want to happen, only one thing that you want to happen with an if statement, you don't need the curly brackets. So I can write if x is greater than width, then x is 0. So if x is greater than width, this is the same thing as this. You better put an extra curly there. Yeah, that's the same thing. So now, once my rectangle gets past the screen, past width, it's going to loop around. Isn't that cool? If I want this to go a little faster, if I want it maybe to be 0 the first 60th of a second, then 5, and then 10 and stuff, I want it to increment by 5. This is like its velocity, basically. So I can do that. It'll go really fast across the screen. And the reason I don't use if x equals width here is because maybe I decided, you know what, I want it to go 6. I want it to go that fast. We're going to have a problem. It's never going to equal. If I keep adding 6 to x, it's never going to equal 400. It's going to be like 402 or something like that. So I always use if x is greater than width to loop it around. Now it'll go a little faster. Another way of writing x equals x plus 6, the cool way, this is x equals x plus 1, and this is x equals x plus 6. So that's a shorthand way of writing that. Maybe I'll keep it at 5. So this is one way of animating something to go across the screen. And if it wasn't a rectangle and it was instead words, I'll put words down here, text, hello, comma. Now usually I have my x location here. I'm going to put x there instead of variable. And then I'll put 100. I'll comment out my rectangle. And look what I've got. Hello, going across the screen. Isn't that neat? If I want it to be really big, text size 100. Going to be huge. Going to go a little slower across the screen too. The bigger your text is, sometimes it makes your program run a little slower. And you'll see that in a second. So this is the first way to animate something, is just to animate, just to have a variable for its position and then increment that variable. Oh, I need to show you how to do this with bread in my portrait file. So let's go to my portrait file and let's find my bread variable, or let's find my bread. Here's my case 2 is my bread area. Here's my text that says bread, and it is starting at width over 0. So instead of having width over 0, this is how you're going to animate some of your text. Well, maybe I'll do the y. I'll do the y location. So maybe I'll call this bread location. That's going to be a variable. I could just call it y also, but I think I'm going to have so many different Y's and X's and stuff. I'm going to call it breadloaf. Then I need to add something to breadloaf equals breadloaf plus 5. And then if breadloaf is greater than, remember, so I'm making this go up and down now. So I'll have if breadloaf is greater than height, breadloaf equals 0. This ought to be interesting. I've got to declare this or define it or something. I'm going to get an error if I don't declare it up at the top. So breadloaf, I'm copying it. You see me copying it. I'm not even trusting myself to write it down here. Copy paste equals 0. Let's see if that works. You notice that my bread area is case 2. I want to just start my program at case 2 right now. So I wrote let state equal 2. Usually I started at 0, but I put 2 in there just so I don't have to click a whole bunch of times. Look at my bread is going across. My background hasn't loaded again because I'm in a parking lot. It's going to take a minute. Let's see how long it takes. That bread picture is probably huge, but it is centered. That is one way of animating stuff. The next way to animate stuff is kind of cool. This is using the translation, that translate command. First I'm going to show a rectangle going across the stage with translate. Let's do that. Pull up another editor. And this time we're going to do a rectangle again, rect 100, 100, 100, 100. But this time we love our rectangle being at this area here. Here's another way to move stuff around. And this is for more complicated things than just a rectangle. And I'll show you that in a minute. I'm going to, again, define a variable, declare and initialize a variable called x. So I'm going to use the translate command, and I'm going to say translate x, 0. That means that move it along the x-axis, whatever my x is, and then move it along the y-axis 0. We're not changing the y-axis at all. And then I will do x equals x plus 5 once again. You may also want to do a push and a pop because again, you're using the scary translate command, and the translate commands build up, just like rotate and scale. They build up. So moved across the stage pretty quickly, and then of course I don't have an if x is greater than width, x equals 0. So that will make it loop again. It'll actually make it start at x equals 100 because my rectangle is started at 100. This is the second way of moving stuff across the screen by using this translate command. What's cool is if this rectangle was a very, very complicated set of shapes instead of just one rectangle, this translate command is good for moving that across the stage. Let me show you what I mean. If you want, you can click here. So here I have a student's avatar, a student in the class here. And it's in a function, and I'm going to show how to make this entire function go across the stage. So here's my function Quentin, or it's Quentin's function Quentin. There's a whole bunch of shapes you can see here, and if I call, like when I run this, nothing's going to happen because there's just background 220 here. But if I put Quentin in here, if I call that function, then we're going to see Quentin. Hey, there he is. That's Quentin. And you notice that Quentin is coded so that he's kind of over to the right a little bit. He starts out pretty far over on the x-axis. And I wish that I could have Quentin over here instead. Quentin probably, when Quentin was coding this, probably Quentin had a 600 or something like that on the stage, right? So that's kind of cool. But I only have 400. And so he's off to the right. So if I want him translated over a little bit to the left here, what I could do is use that cool translate command. I'm going to put a push and a pop around this, even though there's nothing else going on. I'm still going to do that. And then if I did translate, and what I want him to move over to the left on the x-axis here. So I'm going to do negative, maybe I'll do negative 200. That should move him over 200 pixels this way. I don't want to move him at all on the y-axis. I'm cool with how up or down he is. He seems perfectly centered here. See, that moved him over. If I want to move him even more over to the left here, I can do negative 300. There, he's over to the left even more. So if I wanted him to go across the screen, actually, let's see if I want him to go across to the left and then loop around to the right. So I'd start him where he was, and then I'd subtract from X till he got to 0, and then once he got past less than 0, I'd move him, I'd start him at width again. So here's how to make something go to the left. We'll need a variable again, let. Maybe I'll do Quentin position. I'll do Quentin pos equals 0. And then here I got Quentin pos, Quentin position. And then, either here or after where I'm printing him, I'll probably do this. Quentin pos equals Quentin pos minus, I'll do -5, so he moves rather quickly. And so the first time, he started at 0, so it means he'll start there and he'll move to the left slowly. Let's see. Yeah, it's not that slow. And now it's getting less and less. So once he gets less than 0 to the left here, once his X position gets less than 0, I'm going to set it equal to width again. So if Quentin, kind of hard to write that, Quentin pos is less than 0, Quentin pos, I'll set it equal to 400. Well, I'll set it equal to width because the width of the screen. So now he's going to loop around. Oh, right. This is when he's here, he's at 0. I forgot about that. So I'll have to do if Quentin pos is less than negative. Sometimes you have to do this, and you may have to do this with your text too. If it gets less than negative 400. I just guessed on that, but he's about 400 in on the right side of the screen there. This got really mathy too. Sorry, everybody. But I just have experience. If you watch me, you can learn from all my experience. So isn't that cool? You can use Translate to move a whole bunch of shapes or an entire function or something like that. And so we're not really messing with any of these numbers in here at all. We have the function here, Quentin, and then we're using a translate command to move his position over. So that was the second way of animating stuff with translation. Normally I give it like another project during the year. I'll give like a project where you have to animate your avatar going across the screen, but I'm not going to give that project here because we're compressed learning in the winter session. But if your avatar appears in your portrait, that might be pretty cool, just going across the screen like that. That'd be kind of neat. Rotation animation. I want to tell you just a little bit about that. I've actually been practicing that, so it's getting a lot easier for me. The thing that you rotate, remember I was showing you guys a little bit about this before. Everything rotates around the 0, 0 axis. So if you've got something out here and then you try to rotate it, and usually we want to rotate stuff like usually we want to rotate stuff just like a spinning star or something like that, right? We don't usually want to rotate something around. We don't usually want to rotate something like this, right? So in order to do that, the thing that you rotate must exist with its center at 0, 0. And so if we don't want everything to be up here rotating right at 0, 0, right? We want to maybe you want to have stars or gears or something rotating all over your screen. So you have them exist at 0, 0, but then you translate them to wherever you want them on the screen. Let me show you what that is, and you can code along with me. Open up a new editor. So we're going to practice rotating stuff. I'm going to make a rectangle. Here's my rectangle. I expect if I wanted to rotate this and kind of make a spinning rectangle, right, I'd want to rotate it around this center point. We're going to find out if I need to do rect mode center or not. Right now, it probably will rotate around this point. And if I do rotate, and let me show you one other thing too. There is a concept called frame count, which counts the frames, go figure. So it looks like this, frame count, and I'm going to print it out so you guys can see it down in the console. It's going to be very easy for me to print it out. So the first time it goes through this draw loop, frame count will be 1, and then it'll be 2 and 3, watch. So it's see how fast it's going? The frames are going by really fast, but this is a little variable. See, it turned pink here, so it's a preconceived variable, and it just counts up. It's just different all the time and counts up. We can actually use that to move stuff around the screen or to change a rotation. And I'll show you guys. We're going to use the rotate command. And before I was having you guys make a variable that changes, and then I was adding 1 to it, but you can actually use frame count, right? It'll be 1, and then it'll be 2, and then it'll be 3, and stuff like that. In fact, it may rotate too fast this way. Let's see what it does, in fact. Yeah, so you see that it's rotating really fast, and it's rotating around this point here. I'm going to slow it down because it's rotating 60 times a second, and it's probably rotating in radians too. If I do like multiply it by 0.02 or something, it's going to slow it down. Watch. See, now it's slowed down, but it's still rotating around this much. It's up here and it's coming down, right? So if I change that to 0.5, that's a little bit bigger of a number, so it'll go a little faster, but it's still rotating in this crazy place. It's because this is not 0, 0. If I change this to 0, 0, 0, 0, you'll see it rotates right here. Look, and see it's rotating by the top left-hand corner. You may have a star or some other image or something like that you may want to use image mode center. I'm putting rect mode center now, so it's going to be in the center. Now it's rotating like that. So that's one step. Now if I want that to be rotating over here or something like that, I've got to translate it. So if you do translate, because my rectangle is always going to be, it's got to be at 0, 0 in order to rotate around its middle. So if I do translate, I want to put it maybe over here. What is that? About 300, 100. If I do this, 300, 100, then it'll be over there. See? And so if I wanted another rectangle rotating over here and a different size, I can do that too. I probably want to do push, and then pop here. And then if I want to make another rotating rectangle, I'll just copy all this too. And then what this rectangle will be 50. It'll be 50 wide and 50 big, and I will translate it. We'll put it down here. That will be 100, 300. It's kind of confusing maybe. I hope it's not too confusing. There's like a tinier one. So you could, if you can find a draw star routine, which you can probably find on the internet, you can have stars rotating or gears. I was going to have this cartwheel rotating, right? You guys saw my cartwheel. Yeah, in order to get this cartwheel rotating across the screen, this was a PNG file with a transparent background that I got on the internet. I pulled it into Photoshop, and in Photoshop, I kid you not, there was a button that just popped up that said like erase background, and I went, sure, click. I clicked on it and the background got erased. So a lot of times students turn things in with rotating, or moving images and stuff, and there's like a weird white background behind them. It's not too hard to get it to, it's a little bit of work, but it might be a good challenge in case you have something that you want a transparent background. Figure out how to make the background transparent. And that's not really something we teach in CTK. This is something we, if you're here at ISU, you should be able to figure that out using the internet. But I'm going to show you how I did this in the program. When I start my program, it keeps coming up on the bread, which is really irritating to me. And that is because I started at, I changed this to be let state equals 2, just so I could be testing out that second state. Since I want to work on the Capoeira one now, that's state 0. So I'm going to change this back. I'm going to change this back because I'm working on this state right now. So I don't have to click through the bread again. Now I want to make this cartwheel guy going across the stage here. So how am I going to do that? So the name of that particular image was cartwheel. I named all my other images I1, I2, and I3, but I named this one Cartwheel just because it's not like a background image. It's actual. This helped me remember that more. So it's kind of named the same thing as the file, right? And the other ones are not. You have a choice of naming stuff exactly the same as the file or changing it. Anyway, down here, where's my capoeira? Okay, down here, in this area here, I'm going to do image, cartwheel. And remember, so if I want it rotating, I know I have to have it at 0, 0. I also know that my image is a little bit too big, so I'm going to make it 120 by 120 because I know it's like about 300 by 300 and made it too big when I did it first. Let's even see if that works. Oh, I won't be able to see it because it's in the black here. It's up here. But so that's okay. And so if I want this rotating, I got to do that rotate command, right? Rotate. And what did I tell you guys? Frame count. And then we'll do 0.02. Let's just see what, we'll do 0.05. Let's see what that looks like. And then I got to translate it because it's going to rotate it around the center. It's at 0, 0, right? I'm going to have to translate it somewhere. So I'll translate it a little bit further down. I'll keep it at 0 for right now and on the side, but then I'll make it down maybe like 300. Let's see what that does. Yeah, there he is. That's not bad. He's not moving across the screen at all, but he's also moving very slowly. So to make him go across the screen, right now I'm translating him 0, right? I want this to, if I to make him go across the x-axis here, I'd want this to be 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. So I could use another variable called x and I could declare it up there, but I can also use frame count. This is another thing I could do. Once I use frame count though, it's going to go past the end of the screen, and then it's going to be a little bit more complicated for me to reset it, and I might or may not show you a secret way of doing that. So I think I will just add another, I'll be like cartwheel x. I'm going to have a variable called cartwheel x. Then at the top I've got to declare it. Let cartwheel x equals, I'll make it 0 at first. I'm going to do find cartwheel, so I can get to it really quickly back where I had it. Okay, here I am, translate cartwheel x. So then that'll be 0, and then I'll probably want to do, well, I'll do it outside here. I'll do cartwheel x equals cartwheel x plus 5 or something. That the fastest way to do that is cartwheel x plus equals 5. That'll make it go across the screen, and then of course I want, if cartwheel x is greater than width, then I want cartwheel x equals 0. That'll reset it again. Let's see what happens. Yeah, it goes across the, ooh, look at that. Did you see how he kind of floated across pretty quickly, and then like now he's really, it's pretty choppy looking. So I was playing around with this. Yeah, anyway, that's how you get him to go across the screen. I was playing around with this a little earlier, and I was wondering why he was so choppy. And so I started commenting stuff out to debug it. And so the first thing I commented out was capoeira não tem começo. I'm gonna comment that text line out. Can I do that? Or I have to comment all of this out. See, that's so dumb. Okay, / so I'm commenting all that out, and let's see if it's still choppy like that. Yeah, it's still choppy. I'm going to comment that back in. What about this text? I'll comment this out next, the white words. Let's see what happens. Look at how much faster that's going. It's not choppy at all. So those words, those words made it more choppy. If I put it back in again, I'm going to fix it. If I put it back in again, is it going to be choppy again? Oh yeah, look at that. What if I comment out that particular font? So it'll be whatever the font was before it. Let's see what happens then. Oh, look at that. Is it because of the size of the font? So let's test it. The font was 64 before, so I can just put in a text size command, 64. Is it just because the text was so big? Nope. All right, so I just debugged a problem here that told me that this F2 font is making this choppy. This is making my program run slower. You see that? I don't know if I have a problem with it or not. Maybe I like the way this font looks. So one other thing that, this is just kind of checking stuff out. When you make a game later and your game runs choppy, you may be like, wait, what's going on? Why is it running choppy? And then you can comment stuff out. This is a debugging technique, is just comment a bunch of stuff out and see if that's what the problem was. Who knows, right? So commenting stuff out, taking things out of the loop is a good way to debug, try to figure out what the problem is. What is F2 font? F2 font was called LED TTF. The other font didn't give me a problem. I'm just going to take a look at where's my LED TTF here. There is my TTF, and I'm just taking a look to see how big it is. LED TTF was 310 kilobytes. It's very tiny. What are the other? The other fonts were 62. And what was Fugaz one? Here's that was 26. And the Aero Soldier, how big were those? Some of them were very big. It's possible that LED font is making things get slower. I've noticed in P5JS that sometimes having a big font going across the screen makes things more choppy. So you may run into that when you're programming this. What's the solution? I don't know. Yeah, maybe you don't care. Maybe I just don't put a cartwheel guy going in that area. Maybe I just have that area without an animation. Also, you notice this. This is something else I noticed when I clicked on that. It's not really giving me an error, but it's like orange. And I was like, what's the problem? And it's telling me, you see that a leading decimal point can be confused with a dot. It wants me to put a 0 there. Then it'll go away. So it's just like complaining a little bit. So that was rotation animation. And then I wanted to show you about this pixel font, see how slow cartwheel goes across the screen. And then we checked out and we saw that the pixel font was kind of big. Opacity in the Breg fill, and making one more thing go across the screen before I leave you. In my bread area, I think I have an opacity on the fill in that bread, so I wanted to show you that because I thought it looked really cool. Here's my fill command for the bread. I don't know if I went over this in the video or not, but that's white. And then since there's an extra number next to it, that makes it sort of see-through. And I also, like in another version of this, I wanted this to be a little yellowish to match the bread. The white is kind of weird. So in order to still make it kind of see-through, but have it be a little yellow, I think I kind of guessed on an RGB value. I can't do this for some reason, and then that'll give me a problem. Like it gives me an error. It's unfortunate. It's telling me it's not a valid color argument. It wants either 1 arguments or 2 arguments or 3 or 4. So I think the way I'll fix that is it's like that's kind of the color I want. And then it's giving, so it's 255, 193, 7. So if I can can I copy that? No. 255, 193, 7. 255, 193, 7. And then that 200 will function. If I didn't have the 200 in there, it wouldn't be see-through at all. It's that color with this, it's an RGB. But if I put the 200 in, then it'll be kind of kind of opaque. I think opaque means not see-through. I have to look that up. You can see it's more see-through now, more transparent. And if I made that, much lower, like 40, you probably wouldn't be able to see it at all. Yeah, I can barely see it. I'm going to put it back to 200. And the last thing I'll do is I will make this, uh, it takes 28 hours go across the screen. This will be my secret way of doing this using frame count. So this is what I want to vary, right? I want this to be 0, then 1, then 2. And I can put frame count in here. And I can put times maybe 0.5 so it doesn't go so fast. Let's see. Yeah, it's going across the screen kind of nice. Maybe I'll make it go. Maybe I'll times it times 5 so it goes a little faster. So going across the screen. Now it's past the width. So how do I get that to change? How do I get it to fix? I can't really stick an if statement in here. I probably could because it's JavaScript. But if I use the modulus operator, you can look this up. This is something that you would have learned in math. If I use mod width, then that'll set it back. Once it gets to width, I think it will set it back to 0 after it goes past again. So if I want to animate this going across the screen, I want to change this to be X. And I may already have an X, so I'm going to call it X1. Or you can call it bread counter or bread X or something like that. X1 plus equals 5 to make it go across the screen. If X1 is greater than width, X1 equals 0. Restart it. And if I run this now, I am going to get an error because X1 is not defined because I forgot to go up to the top and define it. So let me do that. Let X1 equals 0. And I'll have to remember that's my bread X1. Some people name these things with actual names like bread X so they can remember what they are, and other people don't. That one's up to you also. Once this gets to here, it's going to start it at here again. Actually, if I want to feed it through, I want it to start a little further left. Instead of setting it back to 0, I might set it to like -400 or something because I know this is a very long phrase here. So watch that. Here it goes. Yeah, it's starting far back. I might even start it at 1,000. Going across the screen. Starting way back here, yeah. All right, that should be everything that you need to know for this self-portrait. I hope you have fun with it. Remember that you can pull this up on your phone too and show people. You can do share and you'll get a URL to pull up on your phone and you can show people at during your holiday parties and stuff. Show them what you made. And I can't wait to see what you made. The next video we'll talk about the audio in project. It'll just be one video on that. It's pretty easy. It's not anywhere near as involved in this as this project. Have fun. Have a good day.